I will make another short podcast on the summary of Changing the World. This is, of course, the conclusion part of the second edition of the book, which is chapter 17 in the second edition. This was chapter 11 in the first edition, so many things have been added, but the summaries are looking pretty much the same so far for State of the World and Approaching the World. Here, Changing the World, there is a lot of wisdom in Mark Twain's immortal words. If you always do what you have always done, you will always get what you have always had. At least in the sense of what you had coming. We are in trouble, and everything points towards alarming consequences. If we continue on the beaten track, we must, ironically enough, change direction if we are to maintain any substantial part of what we have gained in human and material terms so far. So we have developed a certain lifestyle, and if we want to keep it, actually we have to change our ways quite a bit. So we must change a lot if we want a sustainable future, and this is the prop here, that you make a slight detour in this direction, you have disaster, warm dry world, and here you have lush green world with beautiful skies. Well, that gives you a sense of the choice. Notwithstanding the astonishing accumulation of scientific evidence of staggering sustainability challenges, humankind is still hardly doing anything to save itself. Many people simply do not believe in the problems or the recommended solutions, regardless of the available evidence. Others are reluctant to make the necessary changes, regardless of whether they believe or not. This resistance to knowledge and change is driven by a range of cognitive, psychological, social, cultural, political, economic, administrative, and technological factors, and addressing it is a crucial task for the survival of humankind. We read this before also, but I'm just reading again, even the Rand report from 1961. Knowledge for any conscious organism is the means of survival. To a living consciousness, every is implies an ought. Man is free to choose not to be conscious, but not free to escape the penalty of unconsciousness. That's destruction. Man is the only living species that has the power to act as his own destroyer, and that is the way he has acted through most of his history, and that's from 1961. So how do we interpret that we are not doing anything? Well, actually we are doing a lot. It's just a question of whether that's the right thing, or that's fast enough, and that's safe enough, and so on. For example, we discuss a lot about the negotiations, Paris Agreement, and Sustainable Development Goals, all under some agency or the other of the UN. And countries sign up, they all commit to doing things to meet their obligations, and people, you get progress reports saying many countries are already on their way to meet their obligations. Some are ahead, and some are behind, and some have no plans, and so on. And all societies at all levels, all countries are deploying renewable energy or some other measure of reducing emissions, but often that is forced on them. If you don't have energy security, then you better rely on solar and wind. And if you cannot get oil from Iran because the West says Iran is under sanctions, then you have to do something else. Sometimes you burn coal. So when Ukraine invaded, or Russia, invaded Ukraine, and Putin turned off the gas, Europeans panicked and said they may start burning coal to manage the winter cold weather, and so on. So we are always doing things, but there are innovations to improve solar efficiencies and materials recyclability and reuse, and we talk about circular economy and so on and so forth. So things are happening, but not necessarily in the sense of global sustainability as a preferred state, but capitalism drives market forces and innovations which may accidentally add up to being putting us on a sustainability pathway. And then there is always a complaint that we are not moving fast enough because all the negotiations and commitments to Paris Agreement are not really resulting in reductions in emissions. So we are doing things, but maybe not as coherently and as coordinatedly as possible. So here, changing the word. Finally, in addition to the changes in society promoted by capacity development initiatives, we urgently need more fundamental changes of society, fundamental changes to society. This is referred to as social change and entails not only the attitudes, behavior, motivation and choices of individuals, but the physical, environmental, social, cultural, political and economic context these individuals exist in. Another way of saying is that our system is a carbon trap, so everything we do leads to emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and the paradigm of reducing emissions has not worked, is not working. So decarbonizing the system will give people choices, because one can argue that individual actions will not make a massive difference in reality in terms of turning down the emissions and keeping us sustainable if everything is still carbon based, right? So sustainable development requires significant changes on the macro, meso and micro levels of society, and we do not have the centuries or even millennia of earlier transformations to accomplish these changes at these multiple levels, even though we haven't defined exactly what macro, meso and micro are. Use your intuition. Okay, so you can think of macro as global, but we are talking about society, so humanity as one society. Macro can be global, meso can be country level, and micro can be community level or subnational levels. We need rapid or perhaps even revolutionary social change towards sustainability. Maybe we are in another great revolution from industria to sustainia already, with all the investments in renewables, efficiencies, EVs and so on. It's impossible to tell though, although it is difficult for us to foresee or even imagine what the resulting society would look like. We must motivate policymakers and practitioners from the state, market and civil society, as well as the public, to make a myriad of small changes that accumulate into fundamental social change. So this entire book is not talking about what technological changes may be needed. It is just assuming somehow that policies and politicians can focus on consumption and sustainable consumption and so on to get to sustainability pathway. But obviously we are missing a lot when we say industria to sustainia without saying something about renewable energy, carbon capture, bioenergy, and on top of that you need all these individual choices in attitudes, behavior, motivation and so on. So the book is, purely from a social science, sustainability science side, so technological aspects are not touched upon here, but it's hard to separate the two when it comes to making fundamental social change that actually will amount to reducing emissions and becoming sustainable. Right? So everybody must grasp the precarious situation we are in. Economic incentives must steer us towards sustainable consumption. Again, without decarbonization this may not really help. And also sustainable lifestyles must engender real social status. In other words, consumption and wealth accumulation shouldn't be the drivers of social status, but sustainability should be. But without a sustainable system or decarbonized system, that may not be possible. So Einstein 1946 once said that about nuclear weapons, that a new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move towards higher levels. I think that applies to our current sustainability challenges too. Of course, at that time nuclear power was new, and everybody was scared. There were projects put together for building bombs to take care of some issues of the Second World War and then nuclear power, but people are still very scared of nuclear in general, but now nuclear is renewable power. Nuclear weapons are still around and many countries are still trying to acquire them. There are strict regulations, but that is led by people who already have nuclear bombs in their military arsenal. So I'm not sure that sustainability challenge and nuclear weapons are good analog, but nonetheless take it for what it is. To summarize, sustainability science provides a comprehensive transformative framework for addressing the core challenges of humankind. It bridges between science and practice and bases its prescriptive transformative power on solid descriptive research and a coherent conceptual framework. Sustainability science promotes changes in society as well as changes of society, with the overall objective of fostering resilient communities, organizations, cities, and societies for a safe and sustainable world. So changes of society sounds a bit strange. So changes in society and maybe changes to society. Changes of society. Yeah. Just English wise it's okay, but I suspect this Swedish person is conveying something that may not be exactly as changes of society. Okay, societal changes is something we say all the time. So anyways, we'll come back and wrap up with another short podcast on the conclusion of all the sections. So we summarized state of the world, approaching the world, changing the world, and now we'll really conclude as we did before. Again, lots of overlaps with the first 6 podcasts, but you can choose to listen again and re-emphasize or relearn or get better knowledge, or just ignore. Okay, see you in the next and last podcast.